Hello, welcome back. Chapter 20 today. It's called Blood and Snow. Are you sure about this? Early's nose was pressed against the glass of the Emporium's front window. She peered out into the wintry Manhattan darkness. Snow had begun to fall. It was now well after midnight, and Mr. Silver had been gone an entire day. I'm sure, said Daniel, pulling on his coat, gloves and scarf. I wish I could go with you. To Daniel's great surprise, Ellie grabbed him and hugged him tight. Be careful. I will. I'd better go. The New York streets were eerily silent that night, every sound smothered by a thick layer of snow coating the city. Mostly, people had chosen not to brave the bitter cold and ice-coated sidewalks. Central Park seemed even bigger now than now that Daniel was alone. And the darkness brought Daniel was alone, and the darkness brought with it the sort of characters who wished to go out about their business unnoticed. He tucked his chin to his chest and hurried on, trying not to look at anyone. When he walked under a small footbridge, he imagined that someone was following, and he began to run. He did not stop until he was past the plaza. 8 blocks later, he spun into the alley and arrived at the bazaar's bazaar. There was only one other customer inside, a man in a long brown coat, browsing a row upon row of bottles. Daniel approached the counter. Excuse me. The shopkeeper, the one with the skin like blue veined cheese, had been examining a gold locket with a magnifying glass. At the sound of Daniel's voice, he looked up with one milky eye magnified through the lens. No refunds, he said, and he turned his attention back to the locket on the counter. What? I never forget a face, said the shopkeeper. Especially a face connected with so much cash. You were in here a few nights ago with that rich man. Well, you can tell him from me, sending a kid isn't going to soften me any. Oh no, I don't do refunds. Daniel shook his head. That's not why I'm here. I wanted to ask you about what you sold us the other night. The shopkeeper looked up and smiled, showing Daniel a crooked row of rotten yellow teeth. Ah, a very fine item. Was it? The shopkeeper leaned over the counter, unfolding his arms. Very fine. Let's just say it's not every day that you come into possession of a vial of a unicorn blood. A crash from nearby. The second customer had dropped a metal box on the floor and was on his hands and knees scooping up the powder that he spilled. Hey, yelled the shopkeeper. Careful with the merchandise. You break it, you buy it. Unicorn blood, said Daniel. Are you pulling my leg? I'm not pulling anything. So you're telling me there really are unicorns out there? Daniel had come to accept that the world was a far stranger place than he had ever imagined. Even so, a unicorn seemed a little far-fetched. Kid, if you know where to look, everything's out there. Why would someone want unicorn blood? The shopkeeper smiled. Unicorn blood, he said, is sometimes called liquid life. Just a few drops will cure you of your ills and boost your strength. It's very rare and very expensive, which is the quality I like best. There it was. What Daniel had hoped was not that true. Silver was ill. There was no other explanation, and the treasure was a cure. When he left the bazaar, the colder night had sharpened and the snow was falling harder. He pulled his coat and scarf tight, leaned into the wind as he walked. In Central Park, trees seemed to sag under the weight of the snow. Daniel's feet crunched through the sparkling white canvas, leaving footprints. When he reached out the darkest part of the path, where it wound under the little footbridge, he was struck again by the strong sense that someone was following. He cast a quick glance back the way he'd come. He was not alone. Through the falling snow, he saw a figure in a long brown coat and recognised it as the customer he had seen in the bazaar. The figure slowed as Daniel turned, as though trying not to look suspicious, and then something happened, something that turned Daniel's spine into ice. 2 glowing dots appeared on the figure's face, burning orange like cigarette ends. They were eyes. Daniel could see the entrance to the park, 200 metres away. He began to run, cold air burning his lungs as his feet pounded on the snow. The gate drew nearer with every step, but the man was catching up. Daniel's blood froze as a hand grabbed on his coat. He squirmed and yelped, managed to slip out of his coat, landing a wild blow into the man's ear. He broke free and tore through the gate into the streets. The Emporium was only a block away. Daniel skidded between 2 parked cars, leapt onto the sidewalk. He ran and ran and ran, not looking back, imagining cold hands wrapping around his neck. Warm light poured from the shop window just a street away, and then he thought he saw someone standing in the door, someone very tall. Daniel's feet hit a frozen puddle. He landed hard on the ice, his knees taking the brunt of the impact. He looked up into a skeletal face, skin hanging loose, glowing ambers. The man chasing him was suddenly in front of him. "Where's the unicorn blood?" the old man said. The voice was a rasping whisper. "What? I don't have it, I swear." A hand crushed across Daniel's face. He tasted his own blood. "I'm not messing around, kid. Tell me where the unicorn blood is." The man stopped mid-thought, gazing up at something. For a half-beat, he was still, like a startled deer. Then his burning eyes grew wider and he turned and began to run. Something else brushed past Daniel. A blur of grey that was gone in an instant. He gathered himself. He could feel hot blood seeping from his knee. The short walk across the street to the Emporium seemed to take forever. "So who saved you?" said Ellie, back in the warmth of the shop. She was dabbing Daniel's knee with a whiskey from Silver's desk. It burned and it stung. "I don't know," he said, through gritted teeth. "For a second I thought it was Mr. Silver." "I'd have seen him if it was," she said. She placed the whiskey back on the desk. "There, done. So you really think it is Papa is ill?" "It makes sense," said Daniel, rolling his trouser leg back down. The way he'd been acting, how old he'd looked for all of a sudden. "He can't have bought the unicorn blood for anything else, can he?" The shopkeeper said the stuff's famous for curing diseases. Ellie took a long, deep breath. "Why hasn't he told me?" "He probably doesn't want to worry you." "Daniel, what if the cure doesn't work? What if we can't find Papa because he's gone somewhere far off in the shop to die? The plan he tried to leave us, it might have been instructions for what to do after he's gone." The bell at the door sang out, and a deep voice said, "Hello? Anybody there?" "We didn't lock the door," said Ellie. She wandered around towards the front door, where a tall, broad-shouldered man stood, silver hair and moustache glinting in the firelight. He wore an expensive-looking charcoal suit and carried a silver-handled cane. Electric blue eyes darted around the room, but he did not see Ellie. She was as much as a ghost to him as any other outsider who came into the Emporium. The tall man spotted Daniel at the back of the shop and moved towards him, passing straight through Ellie like she was made of nothing but light and shadow. He stopped in front of Daniel, staring down at him. "Are you looking for something in particular?" Daniel asked. "Not something," said the man. "Someone. I'm here to see Lucien Silver." Ellie held up her hands, indicating she didn't know the stranger. "Nobody's ever come looking for Papa before." Mr. Silver isn't available." A tall man reached into his coat and produced a grey leathery wallet. From the wallet he took a piece of paper and unfolded it. He handed the paper to Daniel. It was a clipping from a newspaper, some sort of review about a magic show. The date on the paper was 1884. There was a picture of two men. One of them was the man who stood before Daniel now, and he had not aged at all since the photograph was taken. The other man staring out from the picture was a teenage Mr. Silver. There was no doubting it. Beneath the photograph a caption read, "The incredible magic of Vindictus Sharp," on the right, and "Lucien Silver is the talk of the theatrical scenes." Ellie scanned the clipping over Daniel's shoulder. "He knows Papa," she said. As you probably gather from the photograph, my name is Vindictus Sharp," said the tall man. "I was, and remain, a friend of Lucien's." He took back the photograph and indicated that the young Mr. Silver, in fact, I was his teacher. "Somebody taught Mr. Silver," said Daniel. Sharp nodded. "I will come straight to the point. I am worried about Lucien. I attended his charming Halloween ball, and I was shocked to see how weak he has become. And now tonight, when I returned to check on him, I found a child running the shop. The very same child I have just rescued from a mugger on the sidewalk." "That was you," said Daniel. Sharp waved the question. "If you wish to repay me, tell me what is going on around here. Where is Lucien Silver?" Daniel glanced at Ellie. "I don't like him," she said. She sniffed the air around Sharp. "He smells funny. And if he's such great chums with Papa, how come I've never heard of him?" Ellie had been brought up by Mr. Silver to protect the Emporium, to entrust no one from the outside world. Daniel knew this. But these were desperate times. Silver was missing, and the Emporium was beginning to decay. Vindictus Sharp had saved Daniel's life, and he seemed generally worried about Mr. Silver. Surely Daniel owed him a chance. We don't know where Mr. Silver is, he said. He's missing, but we think he's somewhere in Emporium, and we think he's ill. He bought unicorn blood. That's why I was mugged. The mugger heard me asking for the shopkeeper about the blood and fancied some for himself, I guess. Sharps sat on the edge of the table, piled high with golden coins. This is most worrying, he said. Why are you so sure Lucian is still inside the shop? Is there anything you're not telling me? Daniel was torn. His hand moved to the pocket of his jacket to the Book of Wonders. Don't do it, said Ellie. But it was too late. Sharp's eyes were already on Daniel's hands. What have you got there? Daniel could do nothing but bring the book out. Mr. Silver doesn't leave the shop without this, he said. Not ever. I found it. When he saw the cracked black cover, Sharp made a tiny movement with his hand, as if it was about to reach out. His eyes did not leave the book as he said, This is worse than I thought. I know Lucian Silver, and I know all about this book. If he has left it behind, then he must be in real trouble. Daniel watched Sharp, who was watching the book. He slipped the book back into his pocket. Sharp flashed a smile. You've written in the book. I can tell by the way you hold it. Daniel looked to Ellie, who was staring back at him, her mouth open. Is it true? She said. Has Papa let you write in it? Daniel hung his head. He knew he'd technically done nothing wrong by writing in the book, but somehow he felt guilty for being able to do what Ellie couldn't, as if he was stealing a piece of her papa away from her. Yes, he said, to both Ellie and Sharp. Ellie nodded, but there was a faraway look in her eyes, and Daniel wished he'd been more honest with her from the start. Sharp stood up, scattering a pile of golden coins across the table. Then you understand what it is at stake if Lucian is not found. It will be the end of all of this. He motioned around the room, and then pointed to the curtain with his cane. The end of the lies that beyond. End of all of that lies beyond. Daniel had not wanted to think about this, although part of him knew the answer. The Emporium and the people within its walls couldn't survive without Mr. Silver. Will you help? He heard himself asking, though his voice seemed to come from somewhere far off. Panic was clouding his thoughts. He didn't wish to be ripped from a life of magic and friendships for a place that felt like home. Sharp nodded. Certainly I will. I hate to see an old friend in trouble. Lucian would do the same for me. He clapped his hands together and strode up to the red velvet curtain. I shall begin immediately. Rest up, Daniel Holmes, and join me whenever you wish. And that was that. He was gone. I hope you know what you're doing, said Ellie. Once you invite someone in, it can be very hard to get rid of them. I told you. Papa has never let anyone see behind the scenes before you. Except you. And there's a reason for that. He saved my life, said Daniel, and he's worried about Mr. Silver. He's weird, said Ellie. I don't want anything to do with him. She pointed her finger at Daniel's face. Sharp's your responsibility. I'm going to help Caleb with the search party for Papa. I'll come too, said Daniel. Oh, I don't think so, said Ellie. You're far too busy keeping an eye on your new pal, won't you? A very close eye. There was already a nagging doubt in Daniel's mind. Had he done the right thing? Inviting a stranger into the shop? Surely someone who'd risked their own life to save him couldn't be bad. Ellie, he said, apparently writing the book. I was just going to tell you, I swear I was. But Ellie was already gone. Alright, I'm going to leave it there. That was chapter 20. We have chapter 21 tomorrow, and that is called Fear. So I'll let you be the judge of what you think, and until then, I will see you tomorrow.